But do you think it's meaningless? Did he say a meaningless friendly?
I do. I don't think, there's much to be learnt from it, but the bottom line is I also don't think they're overly competitive, these games. They'll dispute that and they'll say that they absolutely are, but Danny can speak to it better than I can.
Well, Danny, it's a good point Simon makes. What more can Southgate learn in a World Cup year like this? He must have his first 11 in his mind now. No?
I don't think it's so much about him learning lots, although he said he did, but I think it's always it's never a bad thing for players who haven't played much international football to gain more experience playing in an England shirt under a different pressure than what they normally play each week. And the other thing that Gareth and Steve work on a lot is the way they want the team to play. So if you're working constantly day in, day out on a certain system at club level, then you need a bit of time to adapt to whatever that system is at international level.
Yeah.
So it's beneficial in some ways, but I don't think you watch a player in a friendly game and think, right, he's for me, he isn't, because what Simon just said, the intensity isn't the same, the pressure's not the same. Your judgment probably comes more when you're watching them week in, week out in the Premier League in high profile games.
Yeah.
But there's certainly, if you look at Conor Gallagher, for example, it's another game in an England shirt, showing that he can play at that level, embracing it, playing with great energy, good technical ability, showing all aspects of his game at Wembley in front of a big crowd. People watching on television, it's beneficial to him.
You play him in that, but would you play him in Qatar? This is the point. Does it honestly prepare them for the big stage? Well, the big stage is all that matters.
But if Conor Gallagher played 6 games before the tournament and Phillips or Rice was injured and he decided to play Gallagher, for example, those games he'd played in those friendlies will definitely benefit him and give Gareth peace of mind that he can do it at that level.
Right.
If you don't give him a game in those friendlies or those friendlies don't exist, then you don't know.
Sure.
You're throwing him in at the deep end. So there is some benefit to it. But I do agree with the lack of intensity in friendlies. Why would you play to the same level you do in the Premier League and risk yourself getting injured? But there's some really good talent. The most probably pleasing thing for me was that Gahey and White getting game time and showing that they're capable, because those two should be pushing Maguire the way he's playing, and obviously Stones in and out of the City team. Yeah, because that's the area of the team that we've struggled with.
And what about formations? Do you feel you're right in that the best teams in the world don't play with 3 at the back? Virgil van Dijk has even had a little swipe at Van Gaal. Yeah, and Van Gaal typically none too happy about that.
Well, if you look historically at international tournaments, I don't think anyone's won a big tournament playing 3 at the back since Euro '96. And if you look at the best club teams over the last decade all over Europe, 90% of them play 4 at the back. It's what players are most comfortable with,
right?
And it's what's got most success. Now Gareth could turn around and go, look, we played 3 at the back against Germany and beat them, and we were a penalty shootout away from winning the Euros, but you didn't win it. And for the majority of the game, after the first 20 minutes of playing with good intensity, Italy dominated the ball. Yeah, for a lot of it. So I don't know.
The best players in the world should be able to adapt, though, shouldn't they?
Yes.
There's Van Dijk having a swipe at Van Gaal, and Van Gaal's virtually saying, "Get on with it." Yeah, because Van Dijk prefers 4 at the back at Liverpool.
But I don't think Van Dijk should be talking about that in public, to be honest. But if we talk about success and the best teams, Deschamps' French team, the World Cup winners in 2018, they play a set way. They don't change. Didn't change for anyone. Liverpool never change. City's Pep Guardiola's team does not change the way they play.
Yeah.
Barcelona, the best team we've seen in the last 20 years, didn't change the way they play, because the best teams don't. The best generally. But should a good player be able to adapt? Yeah, of course. But the best teams don't generally adapt. This is what we're going to do. This is what I believe.
Chelsea
in.
Not winning the Champions League with a back 3?
Yeah, but that's not international football.
Best team?
And the Champions League over the last 10, 15 years is probably, I think, it was only won by a team playing 3 at the back twice. So...
You're with us in this, Mr. Jordan?
I'm not sure why we persevere. The other thing, just to finish, is when you're asking players to play a system at international level where you don't get that much time, different than what they play at club level every week. There's only the Chelsea boys who play a 3.
They should be able to adapt, though, Danny. They're the best players around.
Yeah, you can adapt, but players will play best in the positions that they're best comfortable in. So you'll adapt, you'll diminish some of their performance because they're capable of adapting. And when they're playing against the world's best, You want the best players playing in their best positions that are they're natural to. You don't want to put a right-footed player in a left-footed position. You don't want to put a player that naturally plays in centre midfield out wide because it will fit a particular game plan. So what you'll get is a diminished response. You'll still get a high level of return. But then when you're playing against the elite, that high level return needs to be at 100%, not 80% because they're adapting. It needs to be the best position for the best players to get the very best outcome from them. So your point is right. Players should be able to adapt. But then you're asking this particular margin in the area where the adaptation will have a compromise. Because you are adapting, it's not your natural game, it's not your best position, it's not where you naturally play. You will find yourself in a slightly eroded position. So if somebody in an offensive position is at 100% playing in his best position, you're going to erode the opportunity for a player to be able to negate that position.
To be fair to Gareth and Steve, I think the reason they've done it, and the reason is that I don't think they've felt their back four, as a back four or two centre-half pairings, have been strong enough. When we're talking about City with Diaz, Liverpool with Van Dijk, Barca with Piqué, Puyol, those type of teams you're talking about, even Varane at his best when the French won in 2018, maybe Gareth doesn't think he's got one who he can hang his hat on. So he protects them by having three.
Right, okay.
So there is some logic to it, but
okay.
I just don't think you get the success by playing three. I don't think it suits us.
Pre-match, Simon, the discussion turned to protests, and the England players had met, as we know, for about half an hour, and we're talking about what protests they may or may not adopt come Qatar. Southgate was asked whether England players should boycott the Qatar World Cup if they're that concerned about human rights issues.
I don't really know what that achieves. It, of course, would be a big story, but this tournament would go ahead. We've known for 4 years or 8 years that this is going to be in Qatar. Is the stance against Qatar as a country, if that was the case? We're intertwined, as we're seeing with what's happening with Russia, with all sorts of investment in our country. Sainsbury's, are we all going to stop shopping at Sainsbury's as a protest against Qatar? The Shard, there's all sorts of property investment. So we're in such a complex world of deals, as we've seen with Saudi Arabia recently. You know, on the one hand, people are saying about the investment in Newcastle, on the other we're going and asking them to reduce the oil prices so that we can get our petrol cheaper. So I know the issues themselves aren't complicated, but all of the repercussions of diplomatic relations and dealing with other countries and dealing with other organisations, they are extremely complicated, I think.
I mean, Simon, you said last week, like, all these protests, what protests do you think would be appropriate before the match? You were saying, well, if they're going to protest at all, why are they playing there in the first place?
What I said was it's unfair to put footballers in a position. First of all, they should be aware of the circumstances they're going into. They should be aware of the backdrop to the situation surrounding the building of stadiums in that country, so that they realise they're not living in a planet football. They're not aware of the fact that people have died of our human atrocities and human rights issues when they're building these stadiums. They should be aware of these things. They should be aware of the social fabric of these countries. But there is this tendency in this country, and whether it's right or wrong, every country evolves at a different space and a different pace. And whilst we know that the Western standards we want are not being replicated in Qatar, it's not necessarily our job, or certainly not the job of our footballers, to go into another country and tell them what their standards and what their protocols and what their approach to society should be. We know in the West that being homophobic and being misogynistic are not traits that we want to see around the world, but it's not our gift to go to Qatar and lecture them about how their society is held together. And it certainly isn't the gift of our footballers. Now, you extrapolate that up, and if you want to say to these footballers, if you want to have an opinion, you're entirely appropriate to have one. If you then want to lever the neutral space of the football pitch to advance that opinion, then why don't you go the full hog if you really want to do that and make a sacrifice? That's the full length and breadth of the argument.
But Southgate's saying that wouldn't achieve anything.
No, but it would achieve something if they were not alone in doing it. If the entire fabric of football railed against what Qatar represents, then it would achieve something. I'm not advocating for that. I'm simply saying it's very easy to put a T-shirt on and say, this is what I think, and then forget about it and move on with whatever you're doing. Right?
True.
If you really want to go in, and the arguments that Gareth makes about not shopping in Sainsbury's or not going to the Shard are silly arguments, because then no one's suggesting that people that shop in Sainsbury's can lever their platforms to be able to influence other people.
Yeah.
If you want to influence people and you want the responsibility of being an influencer, which is what footballers want for their own benefit at times commercially, and you want to lever the fact you're in a public domain, lever it. Or don't. Or leave it alone, be aware of it, have your own view on it, but leave the rest alone.
Sure thing.
Is my view.
Next up for England, Ivory Coast, and that brings one Wilf Zaha into the equation. We'll talk about him next.